Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Couples Academy show. Today is Ask the Experts. It is Friday. It is all about you. And I've got none other than Jeff Witt on the ones and twos joining me to answer these questions. So as you know, whether you're dating in a committed courtship, engaged, married, maybe you're separated, you're on the verge of divorce, it's complicated, whatever it may be, this is the time to post your question. Don't be like all those people who go to a pool party and everybody's standing around the pool waiting to see who's going to jump in first. You need to be that one. This is the time for you to be selfish and to get what you came to get. So whatever your question is, post it in the chat so that we can address it. But in the meantime, let the world know that we are live. And if you have a community of people who are in need of help, share, like, subscribe, spread the word, because people are hurting all around the world and it's time for them to get what they want. Listen, to give you some thoughts, we're going to go to a quick commercial break. And on the other side of this, we're going to dive into great conversation. So stay right there. All right, we're back. You're watching the Couples Academy show. We're going to dive into some amazing questions. One that's not posted but just came to me was this. It's a question about what path I should choose first. There's a couple who's going through crisis right now and they know they need help, but the spouse has his own individual issues that he wants to address before they move forward and work on their relationship. And so there's a lot of thoughts out there in terms of what the first step, the second step, the third step should be. We are unconventional in the way that we think and in our process, and everything that we do is intentional. Our belief is that it makes sense to come together as a couple first and then begin to splinter off into individual work that you need to do on yourself. Why is that? Because if we take the conventional route that says, I'm gonna work on me before we work on us, well, the reality is you're gonna be working on you for the rest of your life. There's no end to your potential. There's no end to your healing. There are things that have impacted you in your relationship, prior to your relationship, that may stem all the way back from childhood. There's fears and insecurities and inadequacies and brokenness that we all have to work through. And it is a lifelong journey. So if we wait till we get to a point where we're good now to then begin to work on the marriage, there may not be a marriage. You may have timed out on the opportunity. So we believe in taking a three-pronged approach. We focus on your marital recovery as well as your individual recovery, as well as the affair recovery. These three things can be simultaneously done. Just think about a highway. You have multiple lanes in a highway going in a particular direction, and you individually, your spouse individually, and you two collectively are in different lanes all at the same time, hopefully moving in the right direction. So you don't have to wait to restore your marriage until your life is together, because to be honest with you, your personal healing is the longest part of the journey. So first come together as a couple and then transition into individual. Anything you want to say about that, Jeff?
Absolutely. This is an easy prescription, and it's not an easy process, but it's a simple prescription. Do a last chance weekend, then he can jump right into getting to working on himself with Foundry. Because the reason why I say that is because last chance weekend is 8 months of counseling collapse into 3 days. So if he can commit to 3 days of just trying to get on the same page again, it'll create peace in the home in a way that you wouldn't even understand. And then we have a secondary step where we can help him work on him as a man, become the best man he can be, but create the peace first.
There it is. All right. Brandon's got a question. He says, so my spouse says we should just divorce and be roommates. I told her I'd rather be married. And if we become roommates, then I would leave the household. I guess he's saying, am I wrong for that? We have no kids. I'm going to let you start, and then I'm going to come back and finish this up.
Well, my personal opinion is that the roommates thing won't work, because if you decide to divorce and then become roommates, there's still going to be all that tension that happens between you. Either there's going to be attraction that pops up sometimes once in a while, and you're going to want to play games here and there. And then it's going to feel like you're using each other at times. Then there's going to be the rejection aspect that happens from that situation, where like one person is kind of feeling it still and the other person's not. And the idea that you would be roommates is, to me, is completely untenable. It's either you work on the marriage and get that right, or you look at other alternatives.
There's no way in heaven, first of all, not going to hell, but there's no way in heaven or on earth that I would make a decision to divorce my wife and be roommates. And it seems like she's asking to be roommates because of financial reasons. It's just financially convenient. Because now to live and move out on our own and have our own bills and have our own lifestyle could potentially cause a financial hardship and strain. So let's just be divorced, but let's go half on bills and half. No, that's not gonna work. Because to Jeff's point, what if an attraction is established? You're still in love with your spouse. They're now free to date and casually connect with other people. The amount of fury and rage and disgust and venom that will build up on the inside of you, because the one that you want to be with is now with somebody else, that just can't work. So even when people say, listen, let's just divorce and be friends, or let's just break up and be friends, it's hard to transition into some friend mode immediately after a breakup or a divorce. There's a healing process. There's a grieving process you go through. And the fact of the matter is, if she's asking to just be roommates, most likely that's what you are right now. If you hear us talk about it, couples go from being soulmates to role mates, where all we do is fulfill roles, duties, and obligations, and there's no connection, to eventually sliding into roommates because we're just like two ships passing in the middle of the night. There's no communication, there's no dating, there's no sex, there's no nothing. And then things get even harder and we become cellmates, where we're trapped in a marital prison. And if you decide to divorce and become roommates, I guarantee you, eventually you will feel like cellmates trapped in this arrangement that does not serve either one of you. It makes more sense to not just be married, but to invest in the relationship. And I've said this before, so many men in particular want their marriage, but they don't realize in order to keep the marriage, we've got to work on the relationship within the marriage. What would motivate anybody to stay married to you if all they're going to get is more of the same attitude, the same disposition, the same energy, the same relational patterns that don't work? You've got to be committed to doing something different. So if you want this marriage to work, sell her on how a relationship in your marriage can be new and different. That's something to believe in. That's something to hold on to.
Absolutely.
All right. We're waiting for your questions. And as they continue to come in, one of the biggest struggles that I know people have is in the area of communication. Jeff, why is it so much easier for me as a man to talk to a coworker who happens to be a female, to talk to someone in the street and I don't mean disrespectfully, and I don't mean doing anything inappropriate. But why does it seem like things are just easier talking? Because they say that men and women are different in terms of how we communicate, but it seems to be so complex and so difficult when talking with my spouse. What is it about the relationship between a husband and a wife that makes conversations so challenging and non-romantic relationships a lot easier?
So one of the biggest problems is men have this problem lying to themselves and lying in general. And a lie comes in two forms: hyping, which is where we over exaggerate, and hiding. And when we're out in the real world, we can hide what we don't want. The real world outside of marriage, I'm talking about just out in society. We can hide what we don't want, and we can hype up what we do want. And so the lies can stand because no one's able to look under the hood. But once you've lived with someone for a while, they can kind of smell and sense when you're full of it. And so instead of working on being a person who walks in truth on a daily basis in every aspect of their lives, it's easier to hype or hide. And so we go out and seek the attentions and affections of other people who are going to love the story we put on as opposed to the person that we are.
Powerful point. Let's go to this next question. Very interesting. I had a past affair. He goes on to say, work 12 hours a day. I cook, clean, lawn work, reading work with the young kids, dates. I buy flowers, rub her feet after work, and so on. She says I need to do more. He goes on to say, she says I need to do more to make her feel special because I did all those things prior to the affair. What more can I do? He goes on to say, is she asking for too much or am I just lost? Well, one of the things that I'm hearing you say is that these are the things you did prior to the affair. So it seems like you cheated from what I'm understanding. So the question is, are you still doing those things now? And if you're still doing those things, see, there's a lot here. And all we're hearing is your narrative. But this is what I would say. If you were doing those things prior to, well, how did she receive it? You're saying that she wanted more. Are you doing the things that she asked for, or are you doing the things that you feel that she needs, that she hasn't asked for? What specifically is she asking for? So when she says more, I would go deeper into that question. Well, explain more. What does more look like? If I'm doing all of these things, okay, am I doing something that you're not requesting? Am I doing something that you have no value for? Or am I doing all the things that you've asked me ultimately to do, but yet you want more? So let's clarify and define what more is. Now, if a betrayal has happened, there's a deep hurt and pain, there's a deficit. And so the things that you once did, sometimes you have to double down and do more to compensate for the brokenness that was established when the affair took place. And so I would probably have more questions to ask than answers to give you. But what I will say is that we typically love people the way we choose to love people, as opposed to the way that they desire to be loved. So maybe there's a disconnect there. And if you are meeting her requests and doing everything that she desires and yet wants more, well, that's a whole nother conversation. And are you two engaging in something that's mutually beneficial? Or is it a one-way transactional, I pour into you, you receive from me, but give nothing back in return? That can cause problems as well. So there's a whole lot here that's worthy to talk through.
After reading his additional comments where he says, yes, I cheated and I've never stopped doing those things, I actually asked her that. She stated that she doesn't really know herself, really. So what that tells me is a lot more. What that tells me is that you're trying, but it's not enough. And that's causing you stress because you're like, what do I do? What I will tell you is that something in her does not feel a connection with you anymore. And so when you do those things, she's reminded of other things. And so what I would suggest, if you haven't done it, is you need to get with, we need to uncover, unpack, and deal with the pain that she's feeling. And there needs to be some kind of renewal of that, so that those walls aren't up as much. They're going to be up for a while. That's just facts. Like all of us guys who've ever been through any sort of infidelity, emotional or otherwise, have gone through the pain of earning back trust. But the truth of the matter is, if you don't have someone sit down and help you unpack what went down in a full and complete way, if you don't have someone reveal the what's actually going on and deal with that, then what you're going to deal with is you're going to fight this battle forever. And it's going to feel like a losing war.
I totally agree. One thing he also says is she doesn't know herself really. And that's a whole nother thing. Like, there's three relationships that we have. The one with our creator, God, that's vertical. The one with our spouse, right? That's horizontal. But then there's the internal relationship that we have with ourselves. And if we're not secure in that space, and if that's not healthy, then, and if we don't know what we want, because a lot of people don't. What's interesting? It's been said that most people know more about what they don't want than what they do want. And if I don't know what I want and it's not clear to me, then how can it be clear to you? And so in your attempt to pour into me and to love me and to care for me, for some reason, it's just not hitting. It's just not enough. And I don't know why, because I haven't gone through my own self-discovery and self-actualization. And so this is the reason why we always say that the key to your marital restoration is your personal transformation. And so when I gain a sense of clarity on what I need, because I'm self-aware of my own needs, my own wants, my own desires, and then I can reintroduce myself to you, and we can begin to learn about each other, learn from each other, because we believe in becoming a student of your spouse. Then we're able to connect those dots, and the things that I do now become serving to my spouse and vice versa. So these are some of the complexities that are involved when we're not in a healthy space. We're doing all this stuff and it's just not landing and producing the results that we're looking for.
I just want to comment. So he says, not she doesn't know herself. I'm going to challenge you on that. If she's feeling insecure about the relationship and needs you to do more, I think Asani's answer is actually adequate. Because if you're asking, hey, what can I do? And she's like, I don't know, then she does not know herself. She may not know the answer to your question, but she also does not know herself, because she doesn't know what you could do to make things better. And so therefore her insecurity is you go figure it out. Without being able to tell you or articulate exactly what she needs, that means she does not know herself.
And Jeff, this creates a frustration for men, and let's just flip it. There are men who don't know themselves, and it creates a frustration for women because they get to the point where they use the same 7 words. I just don't know what to do. Because everything that I attempt to do doesn't seem to work, doesn't seem to serve. And so it gets to the point where I stop doing. Right. And when I stop doing, then that creates another problem within itself. And so this is why it's so critically important to have these conversations, because to his point, it creates a lot of frustration. So Prince of Petty, I don't know who you are. I hope your mama didn't name you that. I hope that's just your Facebook title. But Prince of Petty, I would highly recommend. And here's the deal. Like, what I know for a fact, when people call in and set up these discovery calls, one of the first questions I ask is, well, listen, you're seeking couples counseling? Yes, I am. Okay. So the second question I ask is, well, is your spouse also interested in couples counseling? And you know what I hear a lot? I don't know. I didn't ask. And I'm just like, wait a minute, you're seeking something that you haven't even asked or broached the conversation with your spouse yet. So how can I help you as a couple if you're not coming to us as a couple? Right. So I would highly encourage you to have a conversation with your wife, the Princess of Petty. And as a matter of fact, maybe you should change that name, bro. That's a whole nother conversation. Maybe we talk about that. But Prince and Princess of Petty, if you have a conversation and say, okay, we're in this stuck place. Can we talk to somebody else to try to figure something out so that we can get unstuck and get to a better place? Because As long as you continue to do it on your own, you're going to rely on measures and means and tactics that you are familiar with. And many of us are addicted to the familiar. We are addicted to things that do not work. And if they've worked in the past, there's something called the law of diminishing returns. Maybe what once worked no longer works, and it requires that we do something new and different. And if we don't know what new and different to do, then we need to latch on and connect to the wisdom of someone else who can give us that new and different.
That right there. I mean, see, what happens is men, and I hate to say this, women tend to be more security minded. They want to feel secure in a relationship. Men, especially when they're younger, tend to be about conquest. And I'm talking about in your job, in sports, in everything. We're out there trying to conquer the world. And then when we do it, we don't realize we're being driven by instinct. And that instinct causes us to pay attention to certain details that are changing on the ground because we have a strong desire to pay attention to those details in order to achieve this level of conquest. What happens once we get together and we get married is we get settled into that relationship. We've already conquered it. So we stop paying attention to the details that matter. And when we don't pay attention to those details, we're not adapting to the ground in order to conquer new territory in our relationship. I'm not talking about going outside of the relationship. We're not paying attention to the details that there's actually more to explore within the relationship itself. This was a very hard lesson for me to learn. I thought my marriage was dead after 10 years of hell. And I turned it around, and now my wife is literally my best friend, my compadre, like the person I look to for everything. Now, I learned how to take those things that men do well together and separate those things from what women do and do together, and found a new path of what we do together well. And that gave us new ground to conquer together. And that made it interesting. And now my instinct is about conquering together, not conquering her. Does that make sense?
See how powerful that is? And so it's a journey that you're going to take with your wife. And so what the reality is, when you take this journey, all things are subject to change. So you say in here that you're setting up an appointment with a therapist, and I think that would be good. Now, let me just encourage you. This is a teachable moment. I just had this conversation with someone the other day. You have to be careful who you select. And I'm not making a case for us, but I'm making a point. Mm-hmm. Therapy, psychologists, mental clinicians, psychiatry work, like there's so many social workers, there's so many individuals out there that are in the profession of helping people, but you have to go with those who help you based upon the situations that you have. Then you have coaches. The way I kind of like to articulate it is therapy and counseling looks at who you were to help you understand why you are the way that you are. Root issues, things that you need to kind of be aware of, things you need to work on. So you're given aha moments and revelations about your struggles. Coaching looks at where you are today, connects it to your future. So there's strategy, implementation, there are goals, there are tangible, touchable, concrete, and real experiences that they take you through to get you to a better place. So they both serve a different purpose. We believe in the hybrid approach where we combine the two, because to look at where you are today, you got to know where you once were, but you got to also know where you're going. And putting all those pieces together allows for breakthrough and transformation in the quantum leap. So whoever you select, make sure that they're qualified to guide you through a specific process that addresses the issues and concerns that you have, but also creates a game plan to get you to a better place. We have a few more questions.
Real quick. I just want to add one thing to that. One, make sure they're married, not just have a degree sitting on their wall. Two, make sure they're happily married, right? If they're not happily married, they can't guide you to a happy marriage, all right? And three, make sure they have a track record of future casting for the relationship. So that encompasses everything Hassani was just saying, but I wanted to be specific. Make sure they are married. They cannot help you if they're not currently married. They cannot help you if they are not happily married.
There it is. All right, City Women. Hey, good morning. How do I get our sex life back on track? Because a lot of times I don't want to do it because I feel guilty about what I have done to him. And he gets mad because I don't do it, but I feel like doing it. But I feel like when we do it, it triggers him every time. I want to fix this because I really do love him. So I'm not quite sure what you did to him. You may be referring to an affair. I don't know. Whatever it may be, let's just go along with that being the case. There's a lot of self-blame. There's a lot of guilt, possibly shame that you are carrying. And, you know, what I always say is that there is a healthy dose of guilt and shame that every individual should have, because if they don't, maybe they're a psychopath or they're narcissistic because they've got to be able to feel and have some sensitivity to the hurt and harm that they cause another person. So there's a healthy dose of that. The problem is when that becomes your permanent residence and now you live in shame and live in guilt, and then it self-sabotages your relationship because there's things that you refuse to do for the reasons that you're explaining. And so the conflict that you're having with your spouse regarding sex is based upon an internal conflict that you continue to have with yourself. And this is why, once again, I'm going to say it. I don't care how many times I say it. I'm going to say it till you say it. The key to your marital restoration is your personal transformation. There are some things that you need to reconcile within yourself. There are some things that you need to release and let go of, because your own inadequacies, your own idiosyncrasies, your own hangups, hiccups, and internal challenges are going to continue to negatively impact your relational dynamic. And the sex, I'm gonna tell you something, folks. Sex is one of the most important, not the, but one of the most important components of a healthy relationship. And when couples stop having sex, it creates a problem. When couples have bad sex, it's a problem. Now, when I say bad sex, I don't necessarily mean how we physically connect. It's just not good, the sexual performance. But what can also be bad is the fact that when we engage in it, it's cold, it's empty, it's stale, it feels forced, it's triggering, right? Okay. All of these things make up bad sex. And either A, you do something about it and change it, or you choose to do nothing and things remain the same. I would highly, highly, highly recommend that you come to Couples Academy. We have an amazing sex coach, Lakeisha Hines, on our team that works with couples in the same exact situation and scenario that you are going through. You do not have to live here. This does not have to be your permanent reality. All things are subject to change. And even though it may seem impossible, and even though it may seem like a huge mountain to climb, she has helped guide so many other couples over those struggles to get to a better, healthy sexual space. So reach out to us, go to couplesacademy.org, set up a discovery call. Let's get you connected to her, because sex is too important for things to be going down like this, Jeff.
I agree. Like the problem is the lack of connection, right? There's obviously some hurt and pain on his side, which causes him to get triggered. And there's some fear and worry and doubt on your side. And there has to be this idea of crossing back to a place of certainty. And that's going to have to there's going to have to be some hard conversations that are had so that everyone gets everything out and deals with it. And if that's not done, because I guarantee you there's probably things that you're hiding, and there's probably things, emotions and feelings that he's hiding as well. I'm just talking about the detailed stuff, because what happens is there are some people out there who need to know every detail of what happened so they can get over it. There's other people who don't want to know anything. They just want to move on. But obviously, because there's lack of connection here and a lack of being on the same page, there's obviously some things that need to be uncovered and dealt with in order to get back where you were. And to, even more importantly than getting back where you were, to be able to move forward to something more beautiful. If you think that, a lot of people think that they can just move on into another situation and that's going to change things. I'm just putting that out there because I know a lot of people consider that option. And the truth of the matter is, you're going out into a world of hurt and broken people who just left a hurt and broken situation. And what you're going to find is another hurt and broken situation. The statistics bear it out. Like, if you've been divorced, it's even more likely you're going to get divorced on your second one. Even more likely. So the idea here is that even if that was the end all be all, that's what ended up happening, it's best to actually uncover and deal with your junk so you're not walking around with all this baggage. But I'll tell you, if you actually do the real work of uncovering and dealing with all that baggage, you can build something beautiful you couldn't even believe. I'm 23 years in, and I still can't believe we're here. And I can't believe how good it still feels.
I want to hitch on to what you just said about divorce, how it gets worse. You know, statistics suggest that 50% of all marriages end in divorce. The actual statistic really was about 46%, but 50% is it's just become so common in the culture and the language that we use it. But interestingly enough, recent reports have even suggested that it's increased beyond 50, slightly above 50. But most marriages, let's just say, is 50% divorce. If you remarry, 66% is the new statistic, right? The chances of divorce, 66%. If you're on your third marriage, there's a 75% chance that you will divorce. So we think, like a car, let me trade this car in for a newer model, a better model, because this better vehicle will serve me better. And you don't realize you're setting yourself up. You're stacking the chips against you. Like, it becomes that much more difficult. It would make more sense to do the necessary work within the existing relationship. And, you know, Danielle and I were just talking about this. Think about this, Jeff. You've been married to your wife 22 years now?
Almost 23.
Okay. I've been married for 21 years. And we were talking about this. If we, God forbid, divorce today and we connected with new spouses, there's an entire 20 plus year history that is wiped away, like gone. There's certain experiences that you have shared with your spouse that you can't talk about, that you can't discuss, that you can't reminisce about. Like, it's almost like ripping an arm and a leg off, leaving it on the floor and walking away. Like you're tearing a piece of yourself off of yourself and walking away. It's a painful, painful, painful process. So no matter what the existing pain that you're in, it doesn't compare to the pain of the death of your relationship. There's a few more questions we got to get to. This Brandon says, I had an affair through email and social media. I broke off the affair and never looked back. I don't remember everything that was said. My spouse thinks I'm not telling all. Is this normal? Absolutely, it's normal. Of course, it's normal. There's a preoccupation and an obsessiveness with a betrayed spouse to want to know. Right? It's hard to move forward unless I know. I've got to know the details. It's got to make sense to me. What you're telling me, it just seems like an excuse. You keep saying, I don't remember. I don't recall. That was so long ago. I don't remember every conversation. Now, the fact of the matter is, it is impossible for you to remember everything, especially if we're talking months ago, years ago, whatever the case may be. However, spouses do have a tendency to minimize. They have a tendency to block out. Oftentimes people say, I don't want to think about this. I don't want to even give it a thought. And so they force it out or attempt to out of their mind so that they don't have to live in guilt, shame, and regret and things of that nature. They just want to move forward. And so I'm trying to move forward and you keep pulling us back and now we're in a stuck place. And so it's critically important. It's critically important that you don't get comfortable in your deficit. You don't get comfortable not knowing. You don't get comfortable not being able to put the pieces together, because that's what your spouse needs in order to heal. So you've got to engage in total recall. You've got to go through a process where you dig deep inside yourself and begin to pull out, because the subconscious mind remembers. Your conscious mind may not, but your subconscious mind does. And I guarantee you, if you went through the right process, more of the pieces of the puzzle will start coming together. And once she has those pieces and she can put this picture together and it can logically make sense to her, not that she agrees, but at least she gets it and understands it, it will allow her to begin to move forward, and she will no longer be preoccupied with what has occurred.
Without revealing the miracle that is Last Chance Weekend, because I've seen so many success stories from it, and I'm usually not involved in it. Sometimes I'm involved in it, but I've just seen there from being there many times. There's something called the last conversation that's a part of that. and it's designed and structured to make sure that your partner gets all of their questions out, asked and answered. And there's a digging process. And one of the most important things is there's a referee there who actually not fighting for your first name, but fighting for your last name. And in that process, there tends to be at the end of it some kind of calm. That with the engineering of the rest of that process, that 3-day process that is last chance weekend, it there's just something that happens, especially if both partners walk away willing to do the work. There's something that happens that's transformational in that. And so I would suggest that you get with Hassani and the team and give them a call on that because it's important.
Jeff, we're already minutes over, but I don't know why people wait till the last minute to ask like 50 questions. Can you stay on?
Yeah, I can stay.
Okay, cool. I want to be able to give the people what they need. Okay, Zacchaeus says, what kind of support and encouragement can I as a wife, give a husband from a behavioral approach who is overwhelmed with fear to the degree that they are guarded to grow closer to their wife? Jeff.
Wow. So we deal with this a lot because there's something in their history, whether it's between you two or whether it comes from childhood, that comes from being exposed or too close to someone. There's some kind of brokenness there, and I see this a lot in men, especially when it comes to revealing things to their spouse or being able to be open or close to their spouse. So they act guarded, even though they want that closeness. They don't understand what it means to actually have certainty in their life at all. Because with the person who's actually physically closest to you, if you're not able to establish some level of certainty, not just trust, you have to remember trust. We want to be able to trust our spouses. Close our eyes and you catch me, but there's still some fear involved in trust. And so there's a whole process that needs to be gone through to understand that. But if I were going to have to do this on my own, I would start investigating things around understanding what trust is. I would definitely read books by Dr. Brene Brown on shame and guilt and try to understand that situation. But most importantly, it sounds like I don't know your whole situation or what brought you to this point. It sounds like he either needs help if you guys are not in an infidelity situation. It sounds like he needs help figuring out himself as a man, so that he can feel confident and walk forward in all that he does in truth. Or it sounds like you may, if there is some damage there in the relationship, sounds like you may need some kind of counseling or coaching.
Excellent answer. Mary Oken. Hi. I guess one of the affair partners was a coworker. Both can't leave their jobs. Husband says he's cut ties, but they still work together. So I'm constantly triggered. Husband doesn't want to talk about his affairs. We've completed counseling, but I'm still struggling with daily triggers whenever they have work events, etc. He doesn't want to talk about the past, but I'm still struggling. She's the only one left who has daily access to him, and he's not talking. How do I get over living in perpetual anxiety? So I want to cover this from a few different directions. So number one, my question is, why did you stop counseling? Let's just pause. Why did you stop? Because it seems like you're still hurting. You're still in pain. You two still aren't in a healthy space. Maybe you haven't come to terms or established an agreement about how you move forward as a couple. You know, interestingly enough, the one thing that keeps marriages broken is broken therapy. There is interestingly enough, the average couple quits counseling after the second or third session. Either they don't like the counselor, they don't like the process, both people aren't on board, it's not producing results quick enough, so they stop. And so the work doesn't end because the counseling has stopped. And so I would encourage you to get with a counselor that can guide you through a process. And so whether he's willing, get couples counseling. If he's not, get individual counseling. But living in this type of anxiety is painful. Now, regarding him still working there, I think you said that both cannot leave the job. Okay, I don't know the details of that, but let me tell you something. When we work with couples, sometimes those are the consequences and costs that you have to pay to maintain a relationship. We've had people leave their jobs. We've had people relocate to other branches or departments or just new careers. We've had people who have who have left the state.
Mm-hmm.
It was beyond the job. We got to get out of this state and go somewhere else.
Left the country. We've had people who've moved to another country to get away from the situation.
Yeah. And so for you to every single day be triggered because your husband is going back into an environment where his affair partner is, and you don't have access to him and you're not there with him and there's no transparency. And I'm telling you, it's something that you will live in unless you get proper healing and proper guidance. So we're talking about triggers, right? So trust and triggers are the two things in the entire recovery process that take the absolute longest to overcome. And so when I hear people say, hey, yeah, I'm working on myself, I'm like, what are you doing? What is the work you're doing? What program are you following? Who's holding you accountable? Who's guiding you through a process? Who's coaching you through this? If you don't have somebody to help you, then guess what? You're going to continue to live in what you're living in. Find someone, something that you can latch on to that will help you with your anxiety, and find someone or something that will guide you both through a process where you are in alignment and on the same page. Maybe you have also agreed that he should stay there because guess what? It's our livelihood. We need that financial stability. So he has to work. Well, there could be systems of accountability that are put in place within the workforce so that there's a level of transparency that he is providing you so that you have a sense of security when he's not in your physical presence. There are techniques and tactics that you can engage in that will help you in this in-between state while you get to a better place. I would encourage you to do that. Jeff, you had something to share with that?
Absolutely. I had to literally leave a Fortune 100 job because of my indiscretion. And though it was just an emotional affair, it came real close to becoming more than that. And at the end of the day, I had to leave that job and find a new career, give up the benefits and all the things that went with it, and I was willing to do it. My other thing with that is, I know he doesn't want to talk about it, and that's because he's not equipped with the tools to talk about it. A lot of men have this problem. They're not able to step into their manhood and be a real man and just be open and honest. But people who have nothing to hide nothing.
There it is.
Saying anything that he's actually doing anything anymore. I'm just saying he's hiding in something because transparent. I don't have anything to hide. If I don't have anything to hide, then what is it? Like, if I'm not ashamed of the things I'm doing from this point on, and I've revealed everything from my past. That's the whole thing of the story of the cross, is we leave our burdens at the cross, which now gives our tribulations and turns them into testimony, right? It takes all the bad things from the past, all of our trials, and turns it into a new version of a story that we get to tell about what we've overcome. But when we're still hiding something, or we're still running from something, or we're still ashamed because we're not ready to completely be transparent, we get stuck.
There it is. I want this question to go to you, Jeff, because, for those of you who are watching that don't know, Jeff has been working with men for over a decade. Jeff is the men's empowerment coach with Couples Academy. Anything, not that he knows everything, right? Who knows everything, right? But I tell you, there's a level of expertise that he has when it comes to the psyche of men and the struggles that men have. And so the question that Sarah asks is it common for men not wanting to admit to others that they cheated or have issues with survivor's guilt, PTSD from past? It seems that he rather suffer alone than admit to others that he's struggling.
So I'm going to clarify others real quick, and I hope you don't mean the public, because I've seen women that want to publicly shame their men. I'm not assuming that that's you, but I just want to say that for the rest of the audience. There's the women that actually do want to publicly shame their man for what they've done. There's no need for me to walk down the street and go, hi, my name's Jeff, I'm a cheater, even though I can do that. I don't mind. But I can understand why men wouldn't.
Before you go on, that's a great point, Jeff. Listen, we've had a previous client where in the recovery process, the wife had a list of demands, and the wife did two things. She forced her husband, they're divorced today. She forced her husband to get a tattoo of her face on his chest, and forced her husband, which he didn't do because I convinced him not to have a tattoo that said adulterer on his back. So this is the type of toxicity and brokenness that people operate in when they're in their pain.
I don't believe in divorce. I really don't. But unless it's absolutely the last choice. But I think that might have actually made me get divorced. To do that. Like, that's insanity. But beyond that, right? Like, the PTSD, things like that, all this stuff is real. I completely understand that. It is common for men not to want to admit to others, but if it's the others are counselors, are people that are involved in some way or hurt or affected by the trauma in some way, it is important that he comes clean, especially to you, if nothing else.
She's talking about him sharing with other men who have similar struggles. So yeah, I get it from that perspective.
Well, so within our group, they should be sharing that. Like, we do this where, like, I belong to a group that's a little higher level than where most people play. And those guys are just brutally honest with each other. In our groups, we try to get people to open up and be more honest with each other. And they do come a long way. I think sometimes men have a problem being around other men that they see as more jacked up than they are, more flawed than they are. I don't think they have as much of a problem leaning on men who they think can actually help them take them to another place. What I've seen is we typically listen to people who have what we want and been where we've been. And there's a fear process that happens when you're looking at someone else and like, he ain't it. So I do understand that, like, we don't want to reveal it to just any other man, even if they've been through the situation, because a lot of the guys who go through the cheating process are really not remorseful at all. I run into this all the time. They're not remorseful at all. Their only remorse, truly, until we can get inside of that head and that heart, is that they got caught. And so I can understand why somebody wouldn't want to do that. It has to be the right men in the right environment with the right reasons. And I'm telling you, a lot of people don't want to go first. So they have to see someone else expose themselves. So they have to see a man like me sit there and say that I was, in an adulterous relationship with a woman and was trying to get to that room, and it didn't happen. But that's because my wife caught me. Is the only reason it didn't happen. And the struggle that I went through to get that relationship back over years and years and years, 3 years of doing it wrong, not even reaching out to my brother who actually knew something about this. I was scared to reveal it to him. He didn't know I think we were already working together in Foundry before you found out that I had an emotional affair, or working together at Last Chance Weekends before you found out that I had an emotional affair. I hid it from him. It never came up at some particular point when we decided to start working together on this stuff. And then all of a sudden I realized, like, I got to come clean on this because it's not easy. And it has to be around people you trust implicitly because they've already revealed theirs. You know what I mean? I have to show my cards. Someone has to be willing to show their cards, and they have to do it in an honest way. Not, I just got caught. So hopefully that helps.
Great questions, guys. I hope that this was helpful today. I appreciate you all for staying on. These are conversations that oftentimes you are having separately from your spouse. These are conversations that you need to begin to have with your spouse. So one of the things that we encourage you to do is watch the video again, but sit down with your partner and have dialogue and see where this conversation goes. If it doesn't go well, reach out to someone for help. I tell you, the number one skill that needs to be developed is communication. When you can have breakthrough communication, it changes everything. And that is why on tomorrow, if you have not known, we are having a Together We Stand Communications Masterclass. That's right, Danielle and I, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. tomorrow on Zoom. And you can find the link in the description of this video. We're going to be talking about communication rules of engagement, how to deal with conflict resolution, stages of anger, how to rebuild the trust. What about those personality issues that you two share that makes it difficult to communicate? The power of controlling your thoughts and managing your emotions, like these internal conversations you're having with yourself, let alone the one you're having with your spouse. All of this is going to be unpacked. So listen, it is $97. We spend that going out to eat on bad food. We can invest that in our marriage that will produce a harvest of change and transformation. So please go ahead and sign up for that. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow. But until then, have a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday for another episode. Take care.